19 is a necessary assumption question, assumption on which the argument depends. This one is really tough. I think even if you got it right, it's worth it to spend some time thinking about this one, because I know when I chose B, it was not because I had a full understanding of what's going on. Just you kind of just in your gut feel it. Combination of that, combination with like eliminating some of the more obviously wrong answers. Young people believe efforts to reduce pollution, poverty, war are doomed to failure. Okay. So this pessimism, referential phrasing, this pessimism is probably harmful to humanity's future. So sounds like there's a premise-conclusion relationship going on, right? Like this thing is probably harmful to the future, and you have this because, right? Which means, the conclusion is just right here. Here's another premise, right? This premise also supports the conclusion. So they got these two premises together, right? This second premise says people lose motivation to work for goals they think are unrealizable, right? So we're just going to stop right there, figure out what this argument is saying, see if any of the ideas are repeated using different words. This first premise over here, right? Start with the premises. People lose motivation to work for goals they think are unrealizable. So if people believe that something's not realizable, then they lose motivation. They lose motivation, right? And now, is there something where people believe are unrealizable? Yeah, right here. Young people believe that this is doomed to fail. So for young people, we have an instance in which they believe something is not realizable, right? So now from here, look at this. What can you conclude? You can conclude that young people lose motivation, right? That just seems like a sort of a natural conclusion. A points to B. I satisfy my A. I conclude my B. But that's not what they conclude. Look at what they conclude. This pessimism is probably harmful to humanity. What? Where did this come from? Where did probably harmful to humanity future come from? Right? You see, and in order to conclude that, based on these premises, right? In order to conclude this, like some X. Oh, therefore X. I mean, this is starting to look like an exercise, right? Like from our core logic lessons. Right? If I want to conclude X, I give you this. What do you need? Well, you need M/ points to X. Right? Then you trigger this conclude M/, which they don't bother to, but see, you can conclude X. So really what you need here is you need M/ to point to X. Right? Now, if that was all, if the argument just ended right here and they asked you necessary assumption, you need to say, M/ points to X. That's your necessary assumption. Right? M/ points to, I actually wrote X. I didn't mean to write X. Probably harmful to humanity's future, right? That's the thing you need. With this, you get to conclude probably harmful. The young people's beliefs are probably harmful to humanity's future, right? Okay, so that's like an all our stimulus and a question all on its own. And from here on out, we actually get to our real argument. So that right there, I think, is the first biggest hurdle to realize that, now we're going to talk about our real argument. Right? Our real argument is, look, we must do what we can to prevent this loss of motivation. Right? When they say this loss of motivation, they're pointing. See, now they're like, we didn't draw the conclusion for you explicitly, but implicitly we all drew the conclusion. Young people have lost motivation. Right? So now they say, this loss of motivation, pointing to this entire process, a loss of motivation. Right? Forget this. We don't care about this anymore. Right? We must prevent this. Right? This is what we must prevent. So I made this smaller because we're not going to be using this anymore. We're just going to be using this as referent, right? So we're going to be using this as referent. We want to prevent this thing here, right? That's what our argument is. We want to prevent, or rather premises, right? Therefore, is right here. This is where our major premise actually is. We want to prevent this. See, we have, let's. How do I want to say this? Our goal, right? Our goal is that of prevention. That's our goal, right? That's my symbolic representation of the premise. Our goal is to prevent what? Look over here. Prevent this. Right. So what's our conclusion here? Our conclusion is therefore we must action. Right. We must take a certain action. We must enable a belief. Right. Your goal is to prevent this thing to happen. Your action is you must enable a belief. Right. So from this, it's very clear what we need. What we need is if this is A, this is B. Right. What we need, if it's true that your goal is to prevent something, then you must take certain action. Your action must be to enable, right? That's the missing premise that we need. Your goal is to prevent, therefore take the certain action of enabling. The premise you need is, if your goal is to prevent, then you need to take action enabling. Except that's not what B says at all. It almost sounds like B is saying the backwards, right? Enabling people to believe that better futures are possible will help prevent the loss of motivation. It seems like it's saying this thing points to this thing, right? So what's going on here? Well, we can actually understand what's going on here by appealing to a sort of simple analogy, right? I mean, pretend if I tell you that, say Alan is a bodybuilder, right? And Alan would like to gain weight, right? For Alan, he's got a goal of, I want to gain weight. So then I say to Alan, hey, that's easy. Just well, it's not easy, but here's one sort of clear-cut way to do it. Just go to the gym. Go to the gym. Your goal is to gain weight. Your action is to go to gym. Well, what do we need to supply? How to make this argument valid? The presumption is, okay, if a person's goal is to gain weight, then a person's action should be to go to the gym, right? Like just seems like this. Now, but just consider this, just sort of think about this statement, right? What does this statement imply anything else? If I say, if your goal is to gain weight, then your action should be to go to the gym, doesn't that imply that, doesn't this, like as a statement, this whole thing, if you just looked at this whole thing as A, doesn't A imply that actually going to the gym will cause you to gain weight, right? Doesn't this statement actually imply that? The answer is yes. Because otherwise, why are you saying if your goal is to gain weight, go to the gym? You must already necessarily believe that going to the gym will result in you gaining weight. Similarly up here, right? When we say if your goal is to prevent this loss of motivation, then your action is you have to enable young people. We must believe that enabling young people is what's going to achieve this prevention, right? Just like how we say over here, going to the gym is what's going to enable you to gain weight, right? Just it's similar. That's why B, answer choice B, is right. That's why B says exactly that. B says enabling people to believe that better futures are possible will help prevent the loss of motivation, right? Will prevent this. That's precisely saying this thing here will result in this thing here, right? Within the parentheses, right? So it's very tricky. It's very subtle that this is the necessary assumption, but that's how they do it. So the rest of this stuff, now that we know this is actually what's going on, I don't know. Future generation believe that the future can be better, then this stuff will be resolved. It's not really even about this stuff, the pollution and war and poverty. The current prevalence of such problems, such as pollution, poverty, stem from, like, we don't need to peg the source of where this problem is, right? Like we don't need to peg that on anybody. Optimism in the future is better than pessimism. I mean, come on. And motivating people to work will enable them to believe that. So this, I think, is the opposite of what we need. This sounds more like within this argument. All right, if you take the contrapositive, you get M implies R, which I think is what this is saying. Motivating people to work will enable them to believe, make them think that it's realizable.